Have you guys ever wondered if there's a formula for breaking into high finance? Well, you don't have to wonder about that anymore. With me, I'm joined by Jason. Now, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amar. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and Jason, a little bit about him. He's been in investment banking and private equity, and surprise, he started out as an accountant, which is amazing. Now, Jason, once again, thank you. Do you mind sharing a bit of a synopsis about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks once again, Amar. My name is Jason. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Ottawa. I'm from Ottawa myself, which is a non-target. And like you mentioned, I started accounting, and I thought I was going to go down the accounting road and become like a eventually a partner within a big four firm. After doing a stint at PwC, my second year in accounting, I realized, yeah, accounting's not really what I was focused on. And then from there, I really wanted to do investment banking or finance, or at least so I thought. So from there, I really started to, just put a ton of effort and time into the investment banking recruitment process. And along the way, I did like a bridge role in deal advisory at Deloitte and M&A. That really sort of turned me off in investment banking. And then I came across more so like private equity and investments within the real estate space. Eventually, I worked at a larger real estate investment firm out in Toronto called Dream on their investments and asset management team. They have around 24 billion in assets. I did eventually break into investment banking at CIBC and M&A. It was sort of a fluke. I can get into it later on, but really wasn't actually that interested at any point. But was glad to still at least break in and do a summer there. And then I returned back to work more so in real estate private equity. And then in my last year of university, I realized I'm more like, wow, coming from a non-target, studying accounting, very non-traditional background, after getting these roles, thank God. I mean, I felt like just going through the process was very, truthfully, very time consuming and very stressful. And it's really just trial and error. I wasted a lot of time, unfortunately. So I started JHL Consulting to, at the time, this was like 2 years ago. So I didn't really see many people, at least within Canada, offering this type of help to students where
Right.
it was helping more non-targets break in themselves. So happy to delve into that a bit more, but been doing that for uh, with university as well as full-time work, and now more full-time as well for the past 2 years or so as well.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, man. I really appreciate the fact that you were able to see a problem, and as a senior, you just wanted to go through it and try to
Yep.
better everyone else and help them as much as you can. Now, about JHL, do you mind talking about it in terms of how did it really start?
Yeah, for sure. So it really started with me myself doing it myself, right? So I had to go through all the figure out how to network or figure out what investment banking even was and all the technical prep. So once again, like the process itself eventually did lead to the destination which I wanted, which was high finance IBPE. But the journey I just realized was very slow, and it was really just trial and error, right? It was as if it was the equivalent of me. I use this illustration for my students. It's the equivalent of me trying to go through like university, just going through textbooks on my own, like no having no professor to guide me, not having any practice exams to rely off of, right? So, it's possible, but it takes a lot of time. It was very boring. It was very stressful. And I really didn't have much life outside of school and work and recruitment. So I had a few entrepreneurial friends who were in the consulting space in other areas, like nothing to do with finance. And I was, well, maybe I could start some type of, consulting firm or service to help students break in themselves, where I can, leverage my expertise and my knowledge that I've already gained and help other people through it. There was also like a charity component to it as well initially. Like I didn't think to the
Wow.
extent it would have grown, but also part of it was like I want to get back to my church more, etc., and also just try entrepreneurship more in a low risk environment, right? So that really sparked that journey, and I've scaled it, since then. But that was sort of the initial idea in terms of how JHL was born initially.
That's amazing. Now, another great aspect about JHL and something that piqued my interest is the fact that there's more than just you. It's not really a one-man army. There's three of you. Wanted to ask you about that. How were you able to get that team, and what was the process behind that?
Yeah, sure. I realized that as JH has grown and such, I really wanted to not just be like your typical online consultant or coach there, where it's really just like a solopreneurship road. I wanted to sort of create an actual organization out of this, and frankly, I was just too busy anyways to do everything on my own. So I have a few different team members. I have like a VA out in the Philippines, actually doing some of my like LinkedIn outreach, which is really helpful. They're full time. I have two professionals that are my friends from U Ottawa who were both CFAs and I work with in finance space. They help with doing some of the more one-on-one consultations. I'm still quite involved there and do more of the group calls as well. And then more recently, I've just hired an intern to help with taking initial consulting calls with students and evaluating if they're a good fit. So there's about four or five of us in total. Not everyone's full time. I mean, I'm doing this full time, but yeah, I wanted to create a team out of it, and despite JHL being my first initials, my middle name, my last name. Once again, I wanted to create an actual firm out of this, and also potentially, I'm still debating it, but I was also trying to potentially create a sellable asset as well, perhaps down the road.
Mm-hmm. Great ideas. It's very great. I'm glad you were able to, grab an intern. And my understanding for the intern is the person more so delves within the discovery calls and understands if the student's a perfect fit for your program, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Perfect.
So that's almost what my job was most days. We would take about, give or take, at least conservatively 80 to 100 calls a month. So divide that per week, it's about, 5 to 7 calls per day, and they're all about 45 minutes to an hour. So that was pretty much my schedule, and then I had to do everything else. So I realized that, I'm sort of too busy for that, or I've taken well over 2,000 calls myself. So I really wanted to start delegating that out. The intern just started recently. I think he's doing a decent job. He's from Ivy. And then we can see where that goes.
That's perfect. Massive jump. Talk to me about your biggest strengths when you were recruiting for high finance.
Yeah, for sure, Mark. I would love to touch on that. So I think, once again, coming from a non-target, starting accounting, really I didn't have the best footing or start. I was looking at people's LinkedIn's accounts from Ivy or Queen's or Target Universities, more in the Canadian space. And I don't know if you realize this, but I just saw that, okay, sure, they go to the right school, maybe they have the right connections, but the ones that I saw getting investment banking semi-analyst roles or full-time roles, I mean, they didn't have crazy amounts of professional experience in my eyes. A lot of them, sure, part of like clubs, part of like school connections, but I felt like there was a gap amongst that. And at that point, already having a first-year government role, which is common in Ottawa, and then doing PwC my second year, realizing accounting is not what I wanted to do, I felt like my competitive advantage or strength was just stack as much professional experience as possible. So once again, I mean, your viewers can look at my LinkedIn account and further see, but I did about 6 different internships with undergrad. So I did the government in my first year, PwC and accounting in my second year, did deal advisory at Deloitte and M&A. That was a bridge role that then opened up a private equity boutique internship, an investments and asset management firm at Dream in Toronto, which was like an 8-month internship. So that's already 5. Then I did investment banking and M&A. That was the 6th one. So by then, funny enough, I can go into this early, but I didn't even network for CIBC for IB. Like I just randomly applied on the whim of it, was on vacation, got an email for first round. I actually applied like a few hours late, technically. So I thought like I blew my chance. And then I have a few other funny stories about that. And then, I was so primed with the interviews already because I did all that prep in the early years that, I felt it was pretty streamlined, I mean. And then from there, I was working full-time again, back in the private equity space. But I had about 6 internships leaving university with a full-time role as well. So despite having good grades, professional experience, I didn't do a ton of networking, frankly. And then I also wasn't applying to hundreds of roles. So really my edge was just show value to firms through my resume and the professional experience I have, and be able to outcompete or outperform people from better universities or who perhaps have even better credentials, just based on the professional experience and the foundation I laid out early on.
That's fair. And now, viewers, a really quick pause. If you guys want, there's a link in the description towards Jason's LinkedIn. Please go check that out as well. Now, Jason, going back to the podcast, I've seen on your website that you have 70% success rate for your students or whoever comes within JHL. Do you mind talking about that? How does that make you feel in terms of, being able to give back to your community and help those non-target students?
Yeah, it's immense. I think, once again, I would have found this really helpful when I was in your student shoes or looking back if I could have rewound the clock, 3-4 years ago. So, the main thing is really, I just found the process very challenging, very stressful, very time consuming. That's coming from someone who's gone the road. So it just felt like I was every day just felt like a constant grind. I didn't know if it was going to work out. I was really just willing to put in the time and effort, but with no guarantee though. And it was a lot of sacrifice for sure. So being able to help students avoid that trial and error process and, not having them waste so much time or get all these rejections is obviously great. And then the idea of helping, I mean, we have target students as well, but the idea of helping more non-targets break into those roles, whether it's from Ryerson, TMU, Guelph, Carleton, U Ottawa, you name it, like helping more students succeed in those fields as opposed to just seeing, your standard Ivy Queens is a huge thing as well, right? So once again, our whole goal is to add value to the students and really help them propel. And I think our ability to help students succeed really just comes from the backbone that I've gone through this process. I've gotten these results and I know the recruitment cycle in and out pretty well. So we've been able to really sort of create a system that can help nurture the students and really give them that support, the accountability, the community, the resources they need to be able to flourish. It's really like almost having a professor at university, right?
Mm-hmm.
Helping guide students passing their exams as opposed to them just winging it or going through, textbooks on their own, right? Someone teaching them, someone giving them support, tailored resources, practice questions, practice exams. That's sort of what we apply, but in the recruitment space. Because unfortunately, I don't know if you've noticed, but university doesn't really do the best job in terms of actually helping you get a job. It's more on the academic front. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. A entrepreneur I really like, Alex Ramosi. I'm sure you're probably familiar with him.
Yep.
He talks about how when you're creating a solution to a problem or stepping into the world of entrepreneurship, it's better when the problem is something that you faced personally, right?
Right.
And I feel you could relate to that as well in the sense that you would probably do a lot better job in something that you've suffered rather than doing something else completely different. And I could relate to this as well just with the podcast. I didn't have this when I was in grade 12. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what business could entail. I was full on eng kid. I was studying physics and chem all 4 years. But then when I learned about business and what it could really entail, consulting, finance, even HR, whatever it might be, it really opened up my eyes. And I'm glad you're able to give back to your community in that sense as well.
100%. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I follow Homozy here and there as well. But yeah, once again, like that's what really inspired me to do it because this was a problem that I saw myself having. And once again, I just felt there was a huge gap. I mean, there's become a few more consultants here and there, and I feel like I've almost sort of maybe helped inspire other people to do this as well. But really, once again, 2-3 years ago, I felt like there really wasn't much of a community or someone doing this to help students. I mean, sure, these are big players in the US, but once again, that's more courses, etc. What we do is actual consulting and more personalized mentorship, which I think is really what students need. Not just more information, but someone who can walk them through the process, ask questions to, and who they can relate to, and how some guide them throughout the way. So yeah, that was essentially the idea there. And I agree. I mean, I've gone through this process and I really just tried to create the solution or what I would have needed, but for other people looking back.
Fair enough. Do you mind talking to me about the process for JHL that allows the students to get that, 70% success rate?
Yeah, sure. And touching on that, I mean, like we've placed people in bulge brackets, elite boutiques, middle market firms, you name it, all your large Canadian banks, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Lincoln International, some other companies as well in the US. Really what we normally start with is reviewing their resume and their cover letter, just making sure that's up to speed. And then the main thing, Amar, is really just helping students get more interviews initially. And that's mostly through, not to go very in depth here, but it's really helping them with their networking strategy, right? Helping them do it over email, making sure they're doing enough volume and holding them accountable to that so that they're having these coffee chats. Imagine it's this like a coffee chat where you speak with like an investment banking analyst at Barclays or BMO, right? You're putting yourself out there. That helps you not have to send out like hundreds of applications for 1 or 2 interviews. Rather, you can send out a much lower number of applications, but have much more quality. My professor at high school had a pretty big impact on me. He was always telling us like, hey, it's not who you know, it's who you know, not what you know. And that's really what finance is based on. So having the right relationships, doing your networking, getting interviews early on. once again, I didn't actually have to do that a ton because I was just getting a lot of professional experience. But for the average student, that's a really good way in terms of putting themselves out there. And then once they're getting interviews, great. The main thing is walking them through some of our interview questions that are more tailored, and really doing mock interviews. So sitting them down with myself or one of our professionals and really just grilling them on behavioral questions. Why investment banking? Why should we hire you? Tell me about a time you failed. Why RBC? Making sure they have the proper answer structure laid down. We like to follow like an essay-like form. So having an intro, having a conclusion, your main bullet points, making them sound like they're confident, they're presenting themselves well, they don't sound like a robot. And then also on the technical front, obviously doing teaching mocks there. And once again, can go into this more, but a lot of students just focus on like the 400 IB questions, which is pretty standard and very cookie cutter. These days, including when I did my super day, they do ask questions outside of those concepts. Right, those are pretty basic questions, to be honest. It's not comprehensive. So helping students navigate what are those other questions or how to prepare for these more advanced questions is something that students just need to be doing, frankly, and that's where our value add there is in terms of saving students a lot of time and heartache in terms of identifying and preparing for those more advanced questions.
Mm-hmm. Something you touched on earlier was about, it's who you know, not what you know. I can resonate with that a lot, right? At first, I really thought it was a numbers game. You just talk to as many people as possible, and then you'll hit someone that you can chat it up with, right? But then I realized that you have to really cherish these relationships. It's not give and take. It's
Right.
more so, you know what? A lot of the people that I've spoken to on LinkedIn, they've become like really close friends. Like Aish, for example, we had a chat about him, another consulting case coach. He was, he's a friend of mine as well. I could hit
Right.
him up
And
anytime.
I believe he goes to the same university, right?
Right, yeah, he
Right.
graduated from the same university as me, which is pretty cool as well. But even people from like TMU, right? Like Seth, he was on the 10th episode of the podcast, and whoever else it might be, it's really nice when you have chats with people and you're not really in that, oh, please give me a referral, And I
Yep.
appreciate that a lot. I appreciate that genuine connection, and I feel it's something I'm trying to work towards as well.
100%.
Right. Moving on, you mentioned the 400 questions from WSJ, if I'm not mistaken, how they're really cookie
Yeah, like the
cutter.
breaking into Wall Street questions. Yeah.
Right. Do you mind talking about how you help the students prepare outside of the cookie cutter structure that's been taught countless times?
Yeah. So, sorry. So the question is, how do I prepare them for these other more advanced questions, or how to make? So one thing for initially is like literally. I mean, I don't know if your students are familiar with these questions. I'm sure quite a few of them are. It's literally like the equivalent of the last page of your textbook, the question and answer. Like a lot of
Right.
students we find is they're literally just memorizing the question and then they're memorizing the answer. And then in the interview environment, they're just like, oh yeah, that's the question. Okay. And then they're literally just like regurgitating and going through the motions. It's very easy for the interviewer to tell if you actually are just regurgitating information and more so memorizing it versus actually understanding and walking the interviewer through it. So let's just take like a very simple question. A $10 increase in depreciation, how would that flow through the three financial statements? That's a very standard cookie cutter answer everyone should know in an investment banking interview. We like to change it up, or some interviews change it up. What if it's a $10 decrease instead, not an increase or decrease? Or what if it's $15 or $50? If a student's just memorizing the question and doesn't actually understand the mechanics behind it, in the pressure in the heat of the moment in the interview, they're literally just stuck and they don't know. So once again, it's like a math problem. You can't memorize a math equation. You have to like understand it, right? So you have to be able to show you understand. And then if the numbers do change or the question changes slightly, you can adapt because you know how it works and you actually understand the concept. So we focus on helping our students actually teaching and learning the concepts, and then being able to give them exposure to more interesting questions, right? Some other more interesting questions. Like one of my students got asked, like Raymond James, this very complex accounting question. It was like, if you raise 100 million if you purchase 100 million in PP&E, half of debt, half of that's payment in kind interest, half of that's cash interest. The other remaining amount is with 50 million of cash. Assume a 4-year lifespan. Walk me through the first year impact, the second year impact. That's a much more advanced accounting question than just, let's say, you purchase 100 million PP&E, half of debt, half of equity. Walk me through the
Mhm.
first year impact, the second year impact. I remember getting a pretty complex M&A question where it was like company A has a market cap of 100 million and 100,000 shares outstanding and a net income of, let's say, 20 million. They're acquiring company B for an equity purchase price of 20 million, representing a PE multiple of, let's say, 5 times. The question was essentially how accretive or dilutive would the deal be? So not just is the deal accretive dilutive, but then you actually have to calculate and reverse calculate a bunch of calculations and ratios here to actually figure out the percentage of accretion dilution. So funny enough, I literally just saw that question like on the internet before my super day, literally the day before.
Wow.
And if I didn't see that, once again, the heat of the moment, I didn't see that anywhere in the 400 guides, right? Like I would have been probably toast in the interview if I heard that. So there's those questions, or like what would impact the DCF valuation the most, the $1 change in revenue, cost, capex. Like these are just more interesting questions that students can get asked, and that interviewers these days are asking students to really weed people out. Unfortunately, compared to a behavioral question, there's no real right or wrong answer. There's just a better answer. With technical questions, there's clearly a right or wrong answer, and it's a very easy way to weed people out, right? If they ask you 10 questions, you get like 8 of them correct, 2 of them wrong. Unfortunately, these days it's just really not good enough. You need to be like 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. That's sort of what the bar is at this point. So doing mock interviews, asking them these questions, giving them feedback, and giving them exposure to more advanced questions, and really making sure that they're understanding the concepts is what JHL and what we focus on in terms of preparing our students in a more tangible way and really giving them traction in interviews.
Right. I remember when I was going through like my first year recruitment process, trying to talk to different firms, I realized that whatever questions I prepared for, I had a big sheet and that Google Sheets where
Yep.
kind of have your top 3 answers for it. I realized I was never asked those questions. And it would be so off the top of my head when I was talking to the recruiter, whoever it might be. And I realized that I was very happy about the fact that I memorized not just the answer, but more so the process I had behind it. And kind of, all right, I can relate to the story because I actually did this story. So I can relate it to the question I'm being asked. And I
Yep.
feel that it was much better than just, memorizing the question and, oh no, I don't know what to do with it anymore. Right?
100%. Yeah. And even some quick feedback for like behavioral questions. Like we have some people coming to us, like, the students like at school who are like doing presentations, and you can just like clearly tell they memorize like their script or their scoring.
Right.
Like we have students, that's like the worst thing to like see in an interview. It's a real clear red flag. I've been on the other side, like interviewing people, and it's like, okay, I can clearly tell you're just like memorizing something here, and it just doesn't sound genuine. And like, how are you going to speak like that in front of a client meeting? Like that's not really what we're looking for, right? So making sure that people actually can speak confidently, they can speak fluently, have actual proper answers. Like I've had people tell me like their answer for why investment bank is not specific enough. Like they say they want to make a lot of money, they like working hard, and they want to work with like smart people. I mean, why don't you do law or consulting? Like
Or
there's nothing really
consulting,
to do
right?
specifically for finance, right, or IB. So we really pride ourselves in like really making sure students are actually having the proper answer structure, having like an answer, an essay like format, once again, an intro, conclusion, and actually being prepared for the behavior questions as well, and having the best answers possible to stand out. Otherwise, once again, they're the very cookie cutter answers that I've been hearing a lot from students. Otherwise,
Right. A complete curveball of a question. Do you mind talking to me about the process for breaking into PE? Because a lot of people are familiar with the process for IB, it's a year in advance, but not many are familiar with, going to private equity. Do you mind touching on that?
yeah, for sure. So normally the traditional route is you do like get some internships in your second year, recruit for IB in your third year summer. You go back to your last year, do a full return offer, an IB for a year or two, then you go into private equity. After my IB summer in M&A at CIBC in Toronto, I realized, well, funny enough, I realized even going into it, like this is not what I wanted to do. I didn't try the hardest in the internship. I didn't want to return offer. From then, I realized, mind you, that I worked at like a private equity real estate firm the term before. So funny enough, I didn't actually necessarily have a full return offer with them before going to CIBC. They were a bit salty anyways that I was going into banking. But then I realized like I really want to do like something buy side related within real estate. So I essentially declined the CIBC and wanted to get into real estate buy side and real estate private equity. So, I was fortunate enough to go back to the firm that I interned with the summer before. And I was working full time within like a rotational program there. So I started off within like strategic finance and asset management. And that was, once again, a real estate firm with around 24 billion in assets. I was able to sort of break into that field full time right out of graduation, which is not as common. That's more advanced. I was still doing JHL at that point, and then decided to take this entrepreneur route a step further. At this point, I'm still am interested in real estate investments, and I'm hoping to launch my own firm this year, actually, and so I do consulting and a real estate firm. But once again, in terms of the process, like normally, once again, it's hard to do it right out of undergrad. I was fortunate to have interned there and to have been able to go back. I still had to interview and everything, but generally the PE process is you do a year or two of IB, you then move into private equity, and sometimes there's like headhunters that are there to sort of try and meet with you or scrounge you up. But really, you typically have to go into banking first and then do PE, and that's why so many people at the undergrad level are trying to get into investment banking because, put it frankly, no one's really trying to do banking for like 5+ years, become an MD. Some do, but really the main thing is to leverage the exit opportunities that present, whether that's private equity, asset management, hedge funds. I chose more so entrepreneurship. Those are all good opportunities. And that IB summer internship, even though that was a summer, was enough for me to be able to serve as a launching pad. And once again, I'll still always have those experiences that I can use as a foundation moving forward.
Fair enough. And I'm glad. Thank you so much for going over, that entire process. I personally was very confused about, the recruitment process for PE. But apart from that, I think we touched upon all points. So thank you so much, Jason. I really do appreciate you for talking about, your journey, your entrepreneurship journey, and obviously the whole finance realm.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully your listeners find this valuable and insightful. And once again, thank you so much for the opportunity, Mar, and
No
happy
worries.
to rewind this and perhaps do another episode in the future.
Of course, man. Of course, I'll be looking forward to it. Maybe I can get an episode where all the consulting case coaches just come together. Who knows? Like the ultimate
Okay.
Avengers episode.
Yeah, we should try something like that.
Maybe. We'll see where it goes. But apart from that, KKC Consulting viewers, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Stay tuned and we'll see who the next week episode is. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.